Can you do us a latte?
A latte, sure.
I'll still vote for you. I know enough.
No.
He'd love to be the next Prime Minister, wouldn't he?
That's the plan.
The clock ticking down to polling day.
Just 2 weeks to go until Australians head to the polls.
This contest is getting very personal.
Amidst the spin, stunts and stumbles, the two leaders have tried to sharpen their pitch.
A better government which will deliver a better future.
Strong economy for a stronger future. Vote Liberal May 21.
Both sides of politics turned their focus to winning the votes of Australian women.
Today's campaign pledges were focused on Mother's Day.
Meeting mums and bubs on Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, Mum.
Beautiful day for Mother's Day.
Go on, boy.
Our political leaders are preparing to do battle in tonight's great debate, both men with something to prove.
Leaders unleashing on everything from cost of living,
National security, climate change.
Aged care and management of the pandemic.
So tonight, the leaders of the two major parties are facing off. Good evening and welcome.
Has to decide.
There's nothing on it.
Prices go up.
Well, it's just not right.
No, you won't, even though you say it'll be higher.
Scott Morrison, you say that people know you, so why don't they trust you?
But just because you've got a new set of glasses, how can we believe that you're a reformed man?
We're back in a moment.
Most people spend their lives trying to block politics out. So if you tuned in for the first thing you're seeing this election campaign to that second debate and saw Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese essentially shouting at each other, I'm not sure what you would have taken out of that to work out who to vote for.
If you tune in, I don't know very many people outside of this place that have actually watched either of the debates, but certainly if they did, I don't know what they would have actually made of it.
It actually rated quite well. About 1 million people watched that shouty Sunday slugfest, which was kind of fascinating but horrific in parts. 3 days later, they've all changed their tactic. They've realised it doesn't look very statesmanlike, and I thought Wednesday's was really good. We did learn about the two men.
What is the one strength, Mr Prime Minister, that you find in this gentleman?
Well, the thing about Anthony that I've always admired is that he's never forgot where he's come from.
So now you.
He was trying there.
Yep.
Well, Scott's absolutely committed to his nation.
What was confirmed by both events was that Scott Morrison's on top of his detail, but is very combative. Anthony Albanese talks more about the
vibe.
The vibe. He's more emotive in his language, not so flash on the details. But that's been the basically one of the campaign themes.
We heard Anthony Albanese really try and make a point out of showing how he understands the sort of day-to-day impacts of those economic situations that might occur, mentioning steak over mincemeat, wanting to show that I get what it means for families who are doing it tough.
Yeah, rather than the smart end of the street, he's looking at the people who might be cleaning the street. That's Anthony Albanese's mission, to bring it down to the real basics.
Yeah, Labor wants this to be fought on wages. They see themselves as the party that can make the case for improving everyone's situation. Whether or not they execute their arguments as polished as they would like is another question.
Australians will have their first chance to cast their ballots in person this morning.
Around 550 early voting centres open across the country.
And now more than ever, leaders need to be on message and cutting through to voters.
Tensions have also resurfaced inside the Liberal Party over religious discrimination laws.
The point is, it doesn't happen. The religious schools themselves don't wish to do that.
I'm astonished that he has walked away from that.
And I will stick with my position because I believe in the protection of gay and transgender. Absolutely.
At the start of the campaign, we expected a lot of the focus would be on Western Australia and Queensland. Interestingly though, you've seen Scott Morrison spending a whole lot of time in suburban Sydney, where it's clear that he is hoping that there is a suburban, safe Labor territory that he can tackle into, using religion as a potential device to attract those votes.
Yeah, Scott Morrison couldn't get the religious discrimination legislation through the last parliament. He says he's committed to doing it again this time, although members of his own party say or have suggested at least, that they're willing to cross the floor again, because he's not saying if he's going to strengthen the protections in the Sex Discrimination Act for gay and trans youth. So I guess I can't pretend to be in Scott Morrison's mind, but it seems that some people think But the reason he's doing that is to speak to those suburban electorates that voted no to same-sex marriage, because he sees that there's perhaps value in at least saying that the government would act on strengthening protections for people of faith.
And so that's why you've seen these moderate Liberals in the fight of their lives come out publicly say, we will continue to agitate in our party for what we believe in. That's why you need to re-elect us, so there's a moderate voice inside a coalition.
And that's what's really interesting about this. Scott Morrison damn well knows what the view of the moderate Liberals is, and yet he's constantly needling on all those fronts. On Catherine Deves, he knows how aggravating it is to certain Liberals for him to back her in continuously.
So much time is being spent speaking about women's safety and fairness in sport, and people have made the point that little is being said about the real issue here, where it's women are at risk of violence within their own homes in this country, and yet all the emphasis is on this nebulous issue that nobody is actually raising.
So he knows the moderates' view, and yet he willfully does the exact opposite. He's doing it for tactical and political reasons.
And the trouble that he potentially has is, yes, if this does work in some suburban seats and it gets him, say, a seat like Parramatta in Western Sydney, the damage that it could do in those teal seats that have been safe Liberals means it's a net negative for him.
Today the PM has again stood by his candidate Catherine Deves after she doubled down on her controversial comments about transgender children.
That was inappropriate.
Look, that is actually the correct medico-legal term.
Catherine Deves diverted the Prime Minister's daily media conference.
I think it's very important we're sensitive about these issues. Very important.
Minors can't undergo that surgery in Australia.
Sophie, the Prime Minister's returned here to Tassie. It's the third time this election campaign. We're in Lyons, which is a Labor seat. It is marginal. There's Bass and Braddon. Now, Bass, the Prime Minister's visited a number of times, again today, making a mental health announcement with Bridget Archer, who's the MP there.
Yeah, and we have seen them appear together before during the campaign, but I think today's press conference was quite unusual because we saw Bridget Archer become quite emotional when they were making this mental health announcement, because she started opening up about her own battles with mental health, talking about what she's gone through with anxiety, and she actually even revealed as she was arriving at the event today, she actually had a panic attack. So I thought it was very kind of raw and honest from Bridget Archer, but that ended up leading to questions about the mental health of transgender children. And of course the reason for that is because she was one of the MPs who crossed the floor to vote against the government's religious discrimination bill because she believed it didn't do enough to protect trans kids.
What are your concerns for that community when it comes to their mental health?
When we talk about people, whoever they are, that we should do so with kindness.
It's something that is distracting from the messages that Scott Morrison would rather be talking about.
I think he doesn't mind talking about it sometimes as well. It's almost a bit of a culture war issue that he's happy to engage in, and he appears quite comfortable and willing to answer those questions. Does this affect polling day on May 21? You know, do voters decide, no, we don't like this Liberal candidate, therefore even in our electorate, 200 k's away, we're not going to vote Liberal? Or do voters not really engage in the culture wars and are more concerned about policy?
The bells toll for the Morrison government.
The contest over the cost of living has sharpened, with Anthony Albanese taking the unusual step of backing a big rise in the minimum wage.
Chloe, we're back in Sydney.
We live here now.
We do live here now. With Anthony Albanese starts the day on Radio National with Patricia Karvelis. He's asked a pretty straightforward question. The ACTU is looking for a minimum wage rise of 5.5%. Will you back that in?
Well, one of the things I do support is people not going backwards, Patricia. People are doing it really tough.
It's a pretty normal response for a politician to give, nothing controversial.
It's technically not, but you could tell that we were all pretty interested because he has been skirting the details, but you know, this is a firm number that the ACTU is put forward, and we did want to know, did he back that in? And he just wouldn't say either way.
You know, an hour or so later when he's giving a press conference and he's asked, you don't want people to go backwards, does that mean you would support a wage hike of at least 5.1% just to keep up with inflation?
Absolutely.
That was such an interesting moment, and it happened so quickly as well because he hasn't given any other answer or any other detail or clarification. clarification, it actually became a headline because we went, oh, okay, so that is what you're thinking.
And that's the really interesting thing about it is, on the one hand, it is a remarkable answer to give. Political leaders don't usually tell the Fair Work Commission what to do in straight numbers. But at the same time, he'd been saying all morning, well, people shouldn't be falling behind in their wages. When inflation's at 5.1%, then that's what that means. That's where the minimum wage has to go to.
5.1% is a big number, and I think that's why we all, jumped when we heard the clarification and confirmation that he does support that big number.
Anthony Albanese is a loose unit on the economy.
No Australian government or opposition has ever put a figure on the rate of the annual wage increase.
If you were a worker out there and you're hearing Anthony Albanese saying you should get a 5.1% pay rise, if that's all you hear, surely that is a good argument that Labor wants out there with voters. Who cares how it's going to be paid for?
This is a classic case of it's the vibe of the thing. Anthony Albanese wants to be seen as being on the side of the worker. Everyone would want a pay rise, but it's in the intricacies and details that Anthony Albanese does not want to get hung up on. But the problem for the government here is in arguing against Albanese, it has to effectively argue that workers should be going backwards, including the lowest paid workers in Australia.
Yeah, it was clear being on the campaign with the Labor side that they would want a fight on wages in this campaign.
If you get into the weeds of numbers, it gets tricky because 5.1% is not the inflation rate that the Fair Work Commission will be looking at for next year.
But I don't know how much people care.
They don't
real
care.
People out there, they just want that pay rise.
But what we do know is that unions want 5.5%. Businesses said 3. 3 is actually the highest the Chamber of Commerce and Industry has ever put in its submission for workers' pay rises. So you know, between those extremes, it's going to be somewhere in the 4s, which isn't too far from what Anthony Albanese found himself supporting.
And it's a situation where Labor finds itself saying, yes, we will write to the Fair Work Commission to make a submission.
But they won't put the number in.
Right, and so and the defence to that is, oh no, the Fair Work Commission knows what our vibe is on this. Well, what's the point in making a submission at all if the Fair Work Commission knows what your vibe is?
It doesn't want to set up a precedent that would have to follow should it win government and have to do this again next year because the danger is of expectation.
The Nationals are defending 16 lower house seats in this election. Is Barnaby Joyce resonating in rural Australia?
Do you mind if I hand you one of those?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
Patrick, you work with the ABC here in Tamworth. Tell us how the 22 federal election's shaping up.
Well, Barnaby Joyce still as visible as he always is in the seat of New England.
Thank you very much for helping.
Yeah, good to see you.
Really appreciate that.
There's been much made about Barnaby Joyce in the inner city urban electorates, the so-called teal independents saying a vote for a Lib is a vote for Barnaby Joyce. What do people here make about that?
I don't think it really registers too much. They judge Barnaby Joyce on his merits and he's been re-elected 3 times now, so they've clearly got a pretty favourable view.
And do you think that the people in this part of the world appreciate having the leader of the Nationals as their local candidate?
It's certainly the feedback we got when he was returned to that position last year. They were pretty pleased that they'd have him back and thought that some of what happened to him and the way he had to resign wasn't very fair.
Just down the street from us here, the pub, there's a sign saying we're better off sticking with Barnaby, I think is the message. Is that what a lot of people here in New England would think?
More or less, I'd say, Kath. There's not a huge appetite for change in these kind of seats, but we have seen a lot of people move to these areas and maybe they've brought their politics with them from the inner cities.
Just a week out from the election, with polls suggesting a change of government could be on the cards.
It seems the coalition's popularity is slipping. Can Scott Morrison turn things around?
The Prime Minister has made a rare concession.
I know Australians know that I can be a bit of a bulldozer when it comes to issues, and I suspect you guys know that too.
A bulldozer knocks things over. I'm a builder. That's what I am.
Scott Morrison has had this strategy. It's better to stick with the devil that you know. And now suddenly, just 8 days out from polling, he is reinventing himself.
This is one of the 4 big moments of the campaign. We've had the Albo gaffe, we've had the Solomon's crisis, we've had interest rates go up and Philip Lowe, and now we've got Scott Morrison reinventing himself. For ages he's been saying, you might not like me, but at least you know me, unlike the other guy. Now he's saying, you might not like me, but guess what? I'm going to change.
I know there are things that are going to have to change with the way I do things.
That's what he's saying. Vote for me.
and I'll change. Well, if you want change, change the government.